lovely to see some familiar faces and friendly faces around the Teams view. And welcome to this April 26 ABV webinar. It's lovely to be joined by Pete Williams, and the two of us from DataGene will be able to kind of walk through some of the changes that have occurred with the April 26 release of breeding values that occurred, not too long ago. There is a chat function with some, that you can pop some questions in. Please feel free to kind of reach out with questions as we go through. Lee will kind of help us manage those because it's not super easy for me to see them. So Lee will help us to, interject if there are things that we want to cover as we go through. So please feel free to throw your questions out there so that we can try and answer them as we go through. Now, I think the main two topics for us today are to talk about the new stillbirth breeding values and to talk about the updates that occurred to Jersey type ABVs. But there may be some other, subjects that people want to pick up and try and answer those questions as we go through. We've got Pete Thurn and Lee Monks online, so we've got quite a team here that between us, hopefully, we can answer queries that you've got. So to kick off, I'm going to make a fair assumption that if that tractor that failed to start every second Sunday morning, if it was annoying you, you wouldn't probably just say that that's a bit of bad luck or that's just farming. You would pretty quickly turn around and fix that problem. And similarly, if the milk truck driver left it, just a bit, 5% of the milk left in the vat at the bottom at each visit, I think there'd be a pretty quick phone call made to the milk processing company to make sure that that's fixed, because you don't want to have those sorts of losses. And if that's the case, I'm wondering why it is that sometimes we let losses that occur in the herd as we're writing them off as sort of a bit of bad luck or just part of farming. And I'd like to challenge that idea that every animal that we've got is an opportunity. And if we can do some things to help improve the survival of our calves and our cows, then that's probably a good thing to do. At the start of this presentation, I'd like to share some findings from two dairy bio research projects. One that was led by Dr. Majid Kansafed, and the second that I had the good fortune to lead on cow and calf survival. And between these two projects, we learned a little bit about what happens to a herd of, say, 100 lifetimes. So if we've got 100 calves that are born, on day one, we've already lost somewhere between 5 and 7% of those calves because they're born dead or die just shortly after birth. It's a pretty complicated biological thing, got the kind of calving cows, and sometimes things go wrong and we end up with dead calves. But we know there's genetic variation there, and I'll speak about what we might be able to do to help influence the stillbirth rate through using genetics. Within the first 12 weeks, calves are exposed to some issues. They might have a case of scours or a case of pneumonia. And so on average, we lose another couple of calves, in the time frame where they're still in the calf shed, so before weaning. I'm not exactly sure how many animals die then between weaning and when they calve down again, but let's just say for argument's sake, we lose another couple of percent there. We know from Dr. Kansafed's work that after the first calving, in that first lactation, we lose another 20 animals. Now, not all of them, of course, die. Some of them are culled for various reasons, but at the end of that first lactation, we're down another 20 animals. And by the time we get to third calving, we've lost another 16 animals. So within kind of, 48 months or so, we've only got just over half of the animals that we started with left in the herd. And I think that's a bit of an issue. It's a bit systematic in some ways. Every animal is an opportunity. And we can either kind of accept this as just a bit of bad luck or natural attrition, or we can hunt for the productivity improvements that come with lower culling rates, lower mortality rates. Now, there's some dollars that come with this, because that calf that's died, that could be a $1,600 calf in the export sales, or it could be a $2,000 heifer at the point of calving, or that could be even greater. The point is that these animals have a value, and unfortunately, we lose too many of them. So the question is, can we do a better job of using genetic tools to breed animals that thrive in our dairy systems? And that helps us to improve welfare, take the most that we can from the genetic potential that those animals offer, and we can avoid some wasted effort. The lovely thing about calving is when a calving occurs, it automatically generates a record. Someone writes something down about that calving. And those calvings occur like clockwork around Australia. This is a little distribution chart of the calving dates that we see in Australia. It shows us the really, strong peaks both in autumn and in spring. And with every calving, we've got the potential to grab some information about what happened to that calf and that cow. So when we have a record in relation to calves, that record tells us, was the calf born alive or dead? And automatically we've got information related to stillbirth right from the get-go. We can also record information such as calf size, whether it was a big calf or small calf. We can record calving ease, whether there's some difficulty or not. We can figure out if the animal was weaned or not, whether it survived to day 84. We can record some health information, whether that calf had a case of scours, or worse, did that calf die of a case of scours? We can record respiratory disease and other ailments. And in the case of the research herds that I was fortunate to work with the Calf Vitality Project, they also scored calf vitality from a dud through to a ripper calf. And the insights from farmers in recording calf vitality was quite insightful during the research. So in the Calf Vitality Project, we had about 50 herds that were really dedicated to recording calf information. Now, this is over and above the thousands of herds that have recorded calving records, including calving ease and fate and calf size, over a very long period of time. But this group of 50 herds, they went kind of above and beyond to record illnesses that calves experienced. They recorded things like calf vitality, whether it was a ripper calf or a dead calf. And they also genotyped these calves, which gave us a lot more power in this data set compared to what we had earlier. And those 50 herds were really important to being able to help us to develop this new breeding value, the new breeding values that we're going to talk about today in terms of stillbirth. Just to explain a little bit about what we found when we looked at, calf health and calf death in this study. This is the frequency at which deaths occurred in this data set of about 20,000 calves. And that first bar on the left-hand side is the stillbirth bar, the brown one. And you'll notice that it is the major reason why calves die in this data set of 20,000 calves. Way more than the cases of scours or the cases of respiratory disease. And so that was a really important learning, is that if we're going to make a dent in reducing calf mortality, focusing on stillbirth is a really good start. Just to give you some insights about what we found about the fate of these calves in this group. The first column, this is the mean incidence of different illnesses for the Holstein group within the calf vitality study. And in this group, about 6% of those calves had a case of scours, and about 1% of them died from a case of scours. We had quite low incidence of respiratory disease recorded in this group, much lower than what you would see reported elsewhere in the literature from overseas, where respiratory disease is probably a bigger issue, or at least recorded more frequently than it is in Australia. Overall, about 2% of the calves died between when they arrived at the calf shed and when they're weaned. And our stillbirth rate in Holsteins was about 4% in this group of 20 in the data set of Holstein calves within the Calf Vitality Project. Just to give you some Jersey numbers, we had smaller numbers of Jerseys, but still a reasonably good group to look at. They also had roughly 5% of scours. A few more died of scours. Low rates of respiratory disease, and the stillbirth rate was about 5%. I'd just like to kind of also highlight now, averages are good to give us an overall picture, but the story is not the same for every group of calves. And within cohorts, so within groups of animals that were born within the same herd, sometimes the story was not so positive. And so, in the cases, we had Jersey herds with, 18% scours, and, some groups that had very high stillbirth rates, as high as 16%. And that's obviously quite a worry. From this information, we can take that there are some things that are important that influence stillbirth rate and influence the mortality of calves. Things like the parity of the dam are important. So we saw more issues with young dams, so animals having their first calf compared to animals that are more experienced calvers and have had many more calves. We know that calving ease influences stillbirth. So animals that have had more difficulty during calving, those calves are more likely to be born dead. There are differences between breeds, and there are big differences between herd, year, and season. And so those factors are very important for us to include in the models that we might use to predict whether animals are going to be, either more likely to be born alive or dead. So as I mentioned, the things that are important to stillbirth: age of the dam, calving ease, herd year, season, breed, and sex as well. So there's a higher risk of stillbirth with male calves than females. Twins, we didn't have many cases of twinning, but according to the literature, the twins are at higher risk of stillbirth than a single birth. And gestation length. If we've got calves that are born either with too long or too short of gestation length, we can also increase the rate of stillbirths. If we've got cows that have particular problems, such as having a case of milk fever, that can also increase the risk because it complicates the calving sort of process. And there's lots of other biological factors that play into the successful creation of a successful calving. So when we're thinking about stillbirth, we use the information that we know already to help us improve the predictions of stillbirth. So we use those fixed effects that I just mentioned as part of the stillbirth model. Now, for those that have got children around, you'll quickly learn that as a parent, you're not always in full control of those children. And the case is also true with calvings. This is not just a mum problem. So we've got actually two actors involved in the calving process. We've got the dam and we've got the calf. And as a result, we've actually got two different genetic traits. We've got maternal stillbirth, the ability of a cow to give birth to a live calf. And we've got the direct trait, the trait of the calf, which is the calf's ability to be born alive. And so we describe those and give them names. The sire stillbirth, that's the direct component. And this was released for the first time at DataGene in April 2026. So the sire stillbirth, it predicts the percentage of the progeny that are born dead. The average is 0, and lower is better. We want to reduce the stillbirth rate. So -3 means 3% fewer calves born dead or die within a few hours of birth. In the case of maternal stillbirth, this is the cow component. So this is about the cow's ability to give birth to a live calf. Again, the average is 0, lower is better. So if you've got -3, that's 3% fewer calvings, resulting in a dead calf. Now, our research did identify other traits that we could improve genetically. So a couple of prime candidates are scours and calf vitality. And they've been both discussed by the Genetic Evaluation Standing Committee at DataGene as being traits of interest to look at beyond 2026. But it's great news that we can start with two very important traits, sire stillbirth and maternal stillbirth. Just in terms of genetic trends, so fortunately, across both traits, sire stillbirth and maternal stillbirth and Holsteins, we've seen some nice improvement, meaning that through indirect relationships with other traits that we already breed for, we've been able to make some positive improvements. And probably the main candidate there is calving ease. The improvements in calving ease that have occurred over the last sort of decade or so have positively influenced stillbirth rate and reduced the number of dead calves. So it's nice to see that that's on the way down, but we can breed more specifically by incorporating the sire stillbirth breeding value into our selections. So this is also the same trend for maternal stillbirth, again showing a gradual decline, especially over the last decade or so. We've not seen the same focus, or not seen the same change, sorry, in the Jersey breed. So there's been really not a lot of change in recent years in terms of sire stillbirth or maternal stillbirth. Calving ease, it just really hasn't been part of the conversation. Jerseys are known to be very good at in terms of calving ease, but it doesn't stop us from having dead calves in Jerseys, and so there's something there that we can probably focus a little bit more on. In terms of what to expect, so most animals we're going to see between kind of -1 and +1 for stillbirth, at least in Holsteins. We can get some extreme examples that are, as high as 3 or even a little more, or down to -3. So when we start to see the numbers, that helps you give a feel for what you might expect to see in the breeding values for both genomically tested females and males. So where do we find this information? This is just a screenshot of a female's breeding value that you can get on DataVat, and it just shows that down here we've got our sire stillbirth ABV and our maternal stillbirth ABV listed at -1.8 or -2.7. So this animal is better than average for both of those traits, meaning more likely to have more live calves born. And also, I'm sure everyone's got their new Good Bulls app, on their phone, and you'll see that there have been some additional traits added there as well, in the health section. So in this case, it's bulls, -2 for sire stillbirth and -3 for maternal stillbirth. So, this bull's when his daughters are born, his calves are born, we expect to have 2% more live calves than average. And when the daughters calve, they are expected to deliver 3% more live births than average. There are some extra resources, and maybe, Leah, I'm hoping that you might be able to copy the links into the chat or distribute so that people have got access to. But if you go to the DataGene website, there is a new stillbirth breeding value fact sheet. The fact sheets are kind of, they're much shorter with summary information. And then we also have a tech note that's got a little bit more detail. And if there are things that you're looking for, there are links in the tech note to all of the papers that support the stillbirth breeding values. And if there's additional questions that you've got, please feel free to reach out to the team so we can find some more answers for you there. Oh, thanks, Lee. She's popped the links in there for everyone. So there we've got 15 people kind of in the group, and this will be shared to a broader kind of section. But I think it's important for us that are paying attention to this to take a moment to share this news with other people, reminding people that stillbirth it's a leading cause of death in calves. And every one of those animals is an opportunity. And I think in the case of just like the tractor, we don't want to kind of just ignore these small losses that are occurring. We've got some new genetic tools that can help us breed for longer herd life and improved calf survival. And that's really, driven from the research that Dairy Bio has completed and implemented by the team at DataGene. I think I would be remiss, though, in saying that we can't do any of this if people don't record information. So taking that small little note, a small kind of bit of time to record in your herd management software that calving, not only does it help you on farm, but it also makes a big difference to helping us to improve things at a broader population level as well. Now, with that, I think I'll stop sharing, Pete, and hand it over to you, unless there are any questions, Lee, that have popped up that I've not seen that we want to hook into right away.
There are no questions, Michelle, except that I was wondering if you could just reiterate how it is that both male and female animals get both a sire and a maternal stillbirth breeding value.
Yeah. It's a good question. And it goes back to remember the little picture with the mom trying to wrangle a kid. There are two actors here. We've got a cow that's calving, and we've got a calf that's being born, and both of them have to play their part. So the sire stillbirth, that's about the calf that's being born. And the maternal stillbirth is about the cow that's delivering the calf. So if you were, take for the example the bull, obviously the bull's never going to deliver a calf, but the maternal stillbirth is about the bull's female daughters, their ability to calve down cows well. That's the maternal stillbirth part. And but those bulls are also delivering their own calves. And the sire stillbirth is about the calf's ability to be able to be born alive. And it's a classic case where, it takes two to tango. And both actors, both mom and calf, are playing a role in that successful calving. And so it's important to genetically improve both of those traits in animals. And so I know it seems a little funny that you've got a bull with a maternal stillbirth, but we want those bulls to deliver cows that are going to calve down calves easily. We also want those bulls' progeny, their direct progeny, to be born alive. So we've got two traits. Hope that kind of clarifies that, Lee. Okay, I'll stop sharing then and ask Pete to take over from there.
Excellent, Michelle. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was, I think, when you look over time, it's always been something that people or farmers have accepted that it was just part of doing business, wasn't it? Like it was, and in other words, calves that were born were actually, or born dead, were just part of doing business. But we're now seeing that that's not the case. So we can improve that, and it's great work, and it's terrific that you've been able to put that together with a PhD and work on that basis. So, okay, now what we'll do, I'll just try that again. Right. Sorry about that. I'll just get us back to the start. What I'd like to talk about is really one of the exciting enhancements that we've made as part of our April 2026 ABV release.
Sorry, Pete, to kind of annoy you there. I think you stopped sharing your presentation. Could you flick that back on for us again?
Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at one screen and it's not.
Yeah, it's annoying.
It's not coming through, is it? I'll just.
Not yet. Just try again.
Try again. How's that? Is that coming through okay?
Looks perfect. Thank you, Pete.
Okay, sorry about that. split screen. So what we're excited about is really the addition of what we call composite traits. So that was introduced in our April 2026 ABVs, so the breeding values that have just been released, and we'll explain what's changed, what's new, and what you can expect in terms of Jersey type and the new composites that we're very excited to present. So if we look at type, and we look at the cow on the left, we've come a long way. Now that cow, you don't have to do your calculations, that's a cow from 128 years ago. So that's a dairy cow, and not many of us were around in that time, obviously, to look at that. But if you look at the cow on the left, you look at the cow on the right, we've improved type amazingly over that journey, but it's because we've classified, we've recorded type, and we've improved from generation to generation. And that's what type classification is there. So it's recording information and actually looking to improve every generation. Now, what we've been able to, or what Jersey has introduced about 2 years ago, was a new classification system. So we now, Jersey's moved from a paper-based system. So they used to have a single sheet of paper for each cow classified, and they've now moved to electronic capture of that. Now, part of that move is Jersey were able to introduce some new type traits, which I'll actually show you the new traits and how we calculate the composites. So we've now got the base data from which composite traits can be calculated. And the new traits that we're calculating composites for are dairy strength, rump, feet and legs, and mammary system. So if we look at the old type, so that's the type that's operated up until 2 years ago, what we see is that the old type, there was a large portion of it that was allocated to mammary or vessel, as it was called. General appearance was 30%, and then we looked at head. So the actual head of the cow was classified, muzzle width and characteristics of the head. And then we had conformation as a general. So that was the old classification, and that's how we used to calculate overall type. Now, the changes to Jersey classification have come about through really adding some more linear traits. So if we look at the individual traits that we've listed here, they're what we call linear traits. So they're scored by the classifier when they're classifying an animal. They score each of these traits on a 1 to 9 basis. So udder depth, udder texture, fore attachment, rear attachment height and width, center ligament, all of those are now scored on a 1 to 9 linear. And likewise for feet and legs, we've got things like heel depth, foot angle, rear leg, rear view, and rear set. And likewise for rump, the important rump traits and general body characteristics. Now, the important thing is we use those individual traits to actually put together composites. So the composites come from the linears that are classified for each cow, for each animal. And then if we do a comparison, what we've been able to do is the new composite that we're putting together for overall type. So that's the overall score for the animal. It hasn't changed massively. If you look at the old score here, or the new, 35% here is allocated to mammary. If we look across at the old, 35% was allocated to vessel. So there's certain key things that haven't really changed that much, but we've been able to introduce some new traits. So in other words, feet and legs now gets its own composite, as does rump. and then we've got what we call dairy strength, and that's fairly akin to what we used to see over here with general appearance. So it's similar, but not exactly the same. There's been enhancements to that. And likewise for mammary, if we looked at the Jersey mammary system, we used to calculate that from 6 traits, key traits: udder texture, fore attachment, rear attachment height and width, centre ligament, and front teat placement. Now, what we're able to do with the mammary composite, because more linear traits are being collected, is that we've still got the same traits that we previously used, so the old mammary. So if you look at the blue, they're all traits that we used to use and we're still using, but we've also added some key traits. So the red are the new traits, so udder depth, rear teat placement, and teat length. And I think they're traits that typify where we've gone with the breed and classification. More and more we get feedback that teat length is becoming a critical trait, and particularly when people move to automated systems or to robotics. And also rear teat placement. Rear teat placement's one of those interesting traits that we've actually improved it over many, many years. But we're actually reaching a point where the teats are actually moving in toward the middle of the quarters in some animals. So we've overcorrected, or the movement of rear teats has actually gone from wide, probably 30, 40 years ago, to now in the middle, and now we're finding some bulls are actually putting the rear teats too closely. Now that inclusion in mammary, close rear teats will actually be penalised. So, too close is going to incur a lower mammary composite score. So what you'll see from now, so from April onwards, is that revised ABVs for overall type and mammary. So again, Jersey Australia have been able to collect information on new linear traits. We've then been able to use that new information to feed into our composites, existing overall type and mammary. We've also got new composites for rump, feet and legs, and dairy strength for Jerseys. And what we've seen is that there are some change. We've seen some bulls that have eased back slightly. Other bulls have gone forward, and I'll show you an example of a few of those. So the correlation between what we're doing now in April and what we were is 0.7. So that indicates that it's similar, but it's not exactly the same as what it used to be. Mammary is higher, so 0.83. So we have got, previously we were calculating that from linears. We've added a few traits, but it's almost very similar. So if we look as a comparison, and we've taken some comparisons here. So here's a bull back in December that was 118 for overall type. Now, if we come across here in April, that same bull is now 113. And we look at mammary, the bull was 121, that bull's come to 115. So relative, he's still a top bull in the breed for both of those traits, but the very high-end scores have tended to come back a little. So but there's also been bulls, and I'll show you some examples, but here's one here where a bull was 112 for overall type. That bull now has moved up to 113. So not all bulls moved down. Quite a few stayed pretty much as they were. Here's a bull here, hasn't moved that much. He was 111, he's now 110. So the movement wasn't massive, but there are some individuals that did move. One of the reasons they did move was the new classification, the New Jersey classification. We don't see as many heifers now scored what would have been 87, 88 points. So the old system, we saw quite a few heifers that were scored at the top end of those ranges. We're now seeing those same heifers, or the new group of heifers, scoring 84, 85, maybe 86. So there's been a slight movement down of the top end scores. The Jersey is now scoring, Jersey classifiers. We're seeing that. So we reflect that in our overall type scores. So if we have a look at a couple of examples, and I've actually extracted these from current bulls. So here's a well-known bull, Kamikaze. So what you'll see is that basically at 116 for type, his last release back in December was 116. So he hasn't changed all that much. 115 now, he was 116 mammary, but what you'll notice is across here we've now got 3 new traits, so dairy strength, rump composite and feet and leg composite, and you'll have a look back, those traits weren't there in December. So it's an enhancement to what we can present for the Jerseys, is that we've now got a complete picture. Here's the GA Genetics Australia bull Dugan. Similarly, you'll have a look and see that his movement wasn't that great. He went up slightly, but you'll see that he's also added new traits, the 3 new composites. Likewise, the CMEX bull, Whistler, similar story there. He actually went up, so he was one of those bulls that lifted. He was 109 for overall type. In December, he's now 113. So there was some movement. It wasn't all down. So we did see some up movement and we did see some down movement. And there's one of the well-known bulls, Matt, the worldwide sires bull. Likewise, his change was fairly minimal, so he really was pretty much as he was. So the graph, or the representation of that, if we look at what this graph represents, is the overall type as it was in December. So if we come up here to 100, that bull was 100 in December, or those bulls, we now see some spread. So we've got a little bit more spread, so there are bulls still at 100, but some of those bulls have moved up to 106, and some of those bulls have moved down. But it is an enhancement, not massive change, but certainly some change to some bulls. And likewise, mammary, we saw the same there, in that the movement wasn't great because the index was actually very similar to what we had previously with mammary. So it's a tighter graph. There's less movement between before and old. So what that's allowed us to do is that with Jerseys now classifying, and have been for 2 years, just on 2 years, it's given us more information. It's giving us more data in those key areas, and we're able to now calculate composites for Jerseys as we have for the other breeds. So the other breeds have enjoyed that extra information for quite some time. So Holsteins and red breeds. The Jerseys didn't have those extra composites, but we now have them through the initiative of Jersey Australia to introduce a new class system, generate more data, and likewise we've been able to represent that. So it's we would invite you to go onto DataVat. Have a look at the proofs. You'll now see these proofs represented in bull catalogues as well, but go onto DataVat, have a look, and you'll see the bulls that have now got a full panel of information. And well, firstly, thank you to Jersey Australia for implementing the new system, and also to our researchers that were able to put the composites together and make now a full, complete story for our Jersey breed. So, and that's information we also share internationally. So that's also allowed us to fill the gaps where previously we had missing information. So with that, Lee, we'll throw to any questions. If anybody has any key questions on particularly Jersey type or the enhancements to Jersey type.
There's no questions in the chat, Pete.
Okay, good. Good. And with that, what we might do, Lee, is open it up for any general questions like, and I do have one that's come from Megan, and I can probably start off. So Megan Costa had a question as to why DataGene no longer publish semen fertility breeding values. So up until about 2 years ago, we regularly published semen fertility. So that is the actual conception or the semen fertility breeding values. The challenge we had, Megan, was that the data we had changed. So what most people would realise that there's a lot more sexed semen that's now being used. So it's not just a small amount, it's a significant amount. It was that change to sex semen. So for instance, we've got individual bulls that are available through conventional semen, and we've also got those same bulls available through sex semen. The challenge we had with our data was the information was coming to us as one. So when you record an insemination, it was coming through as just an insemination to a particular bull. It might be LSPP, for instance. We couldn't determine whether or not that was sex semen or whether or not that was conventional. And the difficulty is, or the challenge is, that they're two different things. So the result we'll have for sexed is going to be different to the result we'll have for conventional. So we actually modified our model, but what we found was that it was still quite unstable, basically due to the fact that our data was undifferentiated. So the data we were getting from farm wasn't differentiating the fact that it was either a sex semen dose or a conventional. So we've been working with software providers, so Maestro and Easy Dairy, to actually introduce some differentiation, so you can actually indicate to us whether or not it was sex semen or whether or not it was conventional, and we're monitoring that to then at some point hopefully start calculating those breeding values again.
Michelle, there's a question for you in the chat. Have you seen it? You're on mute.
Thanks, Jose, for that question. Look, to be honest, I'd have to go back and check the paper for that. There was, I do remember there was large standard errors associated with the correlations between those traits. When we put the two traits together in a model, the model does have a lot of trouble in separating the direct and maternal components when they're both together. So the confidence that we've got with the correlations isn't really very high, and I think that's similar to what was found in work that was been done in North America as well. So I can't give you the number off the top of my head, but I can dig that up and pop that through to you later.
And Michelle, it may be that I think the tech note might have links to some of those papers as well.
It certainly does, but I think there are a few papers there that might take people time to work through. So I'll see if I can find that figure and share it with us.
Well, if there's no more
Excellent.
questions, I guess
any other questions, even not relative to the two topics that Michelle and I have spoken on? Any other ABV topics that you'd like while we've got the team together? Pete Thurn's online as well. So if anybody's got any other questions. If not, I guess, Lee, we thank everybody for participating and joining us today. We're very pleased with the two initiatives we've been able to introduce for the April release. And certainly if you've got any additional questions relative to those or to anything else relative to what we published in April, feel free to contact us, any of the team, and we hope we can help you through. So with that, thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.